You are listening to TMBDOS. They must be destroyed on sight. The following podcast may contain adult language, conversations surrounding adult situations that may not be suitable for younger listeners, as well as spoilers for the films discussed on this podcast. You have been warned. Now, come on in.
They must be destroyed on sight.
All right, we're back. Episode 111 of They Must Be Destroyed on Sight. I'm your host, Lee. You can't break out of prison and into society in the same week, Russell. And I'm joined by my co-host, Daniel. My friends just call me Ringo Harper. How you doing, sir?
I wish I had a fun John Wayne joke to go with here, but apparently not. So, doing fine. Thanks. I got a little bit of dust in my teeth, and I don't want to go back to the pen, but otherwise I'm doing okay, because I've got a nice hooker with a heart of gold.
Yeah,
who, I'm gonna get to stick with for the rest of my life. A little farm just over the border.
Just over the border. Yep. So we're going to be looking at the John Ford / John Wayne classic Stagecoach from 1939. But before we get into that, we do have some comments to get through. Quickly go to these. One from our friend Mike Murphy from Badasses, Boobs, and Body Counts podcast said, "Good episode, guys." In regards to our High Noon 310 to Yuma episode, I knew I'd enjoy it the second you came out of the gate complaining about podcast ads and ad whores. Regarding Sherry's Berries, while I'd never go to my way to buy them, we did just receive a box as a Christmas gift. I have to say, they're pretty fucking good. He says, keep up the good work and look forward to chatting with you both in February. Yeah, we are going to be, Daniel and I are both going to be guests on Badasses, Boobs, and Body Counts. In February, we're going to be talking about the Zodiac Killer. And if his two co-hosts are also on that podcast, Iris and Mark, that's going to be a very, very crowded episode, I think.
That's going to be a fun time, I think.
Mm-hmm. And we have Jeff Williams left a couple comments here. In regards to our High Noon 310 to Yuma episode, he said, "Solid job reviewing these classic films. You guys have done the impossible and convinced me to give that High Noon song another chance. Still, it ain't no Frankie Lane number, that's for sure. On the flip side, I love the theme to Kiyoma, which everyone else seems to abhor. Different strokes. I like the theme song for Kiyoma, and that's something we will be covering the next time we do spaghetti westerns. But and Kiyoma might have the distinction of probably being the most unique theme song for not only just a spaghetti western, but for westerns in general. It's something to behold."
I don't think I've heard that one, so I'm looking forward to it. Now I'm going to have to look it up before we do the episode, maybe.
And he says, "All the Katie Hirado love brought to mind my underappreciated western Dragoon Wells Massacre, wherein Katie gets in a full-on catfight with tight-assed gringa Mona Freeman, and then steals her ex, Dennis O'Keefe. Go Katie." We're going to put that on the list, Dragoon Wells Massacre.
Yeah, no, looking her up, she had an extended career.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things where you find a lot of these, particularly actresses of color, they did like 2 movies. But Katie Hirado, she was around for like 20, 30 years. She's actually in Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid.
Yeah, like we said,
basically for 30 years she had an extended career, and you gotta love that. You really gotta kind of appreciate. She wasn't just a pretty face, which obviously if you've seen High Noon, she
definitely was as well,
right?
Yeah,
but she wasn't. She was that, but she wasn't just that. And I definitely want to see more of her stuff. Yeah.
Jeff Williams also goes on to say, in regards to Stagecoach, he says, "Easily my favorite Ford Western. Claire Trevor is one of the few actresses with whom Wayne appeared comfortable." And they did I think they did 3 other films together after Stagecoach, I believe. I don't know them offhand, but I know they did do a couple other Westerns together.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, she's also in Murder My Sweet, which I watched last year.
Okay.
That was one of the Chandler adaptations.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And I remember her being quite good in that as well. She's also in Key Largo, which is a great little noir film, kind of a minor noir film, but it's a bogey, kind of one of those like kind of old school bogey films.
Thanks for the comments, guys. Very much appreciated. And if you so desire, listener, to leave comments, just go to our Facebook page. They must be destroyed on site on Facebook. Single best way to get in contact with us and find out what's going on for the podcast in the future. So do that up. We'll move on now to stuff we've watched in the last little while. I know Daniel doesn't have anything right now, although you are going to be going to watch The Last Jedi here soon. Yeah,
the plan is to see The Last Jedi right around, we're recording this the 23rd, the evening of the 23rd. So tomorrow or Monday we'll be seeing The Last Jedi. So hopefully I'll have thoughts about that before then. But other than that, I really haven't watched a whole lot. I did rewatch Fight Club. Because it was on, and that's a film that, I don't know, I have a complicated history with. Maybe we'll have to discuss it in detail at some point. But I did rewatch it, and man, that's a film that has kind of grown on me over the last 2 decades. Let's just put it that way. It seems prescient in ways that it maybe didn't at the time. Like I think it gets, the fanboys. I kind of hate the fanboys because they don't necessarily get it. But that's a film that also I think was after different game than I think we thought it was in '99, in terms of the kind of cult mentality and the formation of that. I mean, it's kind of seen as this kind of fairly straightforwardly sort of anti-capitalist, anti-corporate kind of film. Right. And I mean, and it's not that it isn't that, but it's got some other stuff kind of going on. Yeah, no, it's interesting. I don't know. One day I hope we do get to chat about it in some detail.
Yeah, we should do Fight Club at some point. I totally agree. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
A couple things I watched that I want to mention, and both of these potentially going to be on my best of list at the end of the year too. So, and we'll be doing that sometime in January. We'll be doing our best of 2017, and of course that is the best stuff we saw for the first time in 2017, not necessarily just movies from 2017. Yeah. If you've been following the podcast, that's how we sort of roll with this stuff. I watched 2 films, and both of these are from 2017 though. So. First one is a Netflix film. It's a prison drama / crime drama called Shot Caller that just showed up on Netflix. It really took me by surprise. I was really impressed with how good it was. I think it's probably one of the best Netflix sort of produced films that's come out. I think it's a Netflix one, if I'm not mistaken. I think it is. Either way, it is sort of a prison film, and then so you meet your main character, who's this guy who's been a hardened criminal in prison for several years now. He's joined up with the Aryan Brotherhood in the prison. He's got the white pride tattoo on his back and all that stuff. And you kind of think where this stuff's going, because you basically follow him on his first day out of prison, and you kind of think, okay, I know what's going on. I have my suspicions of what's going on, because you just know the tropes of the genre. But this film actually sort of twists and turns several times, and I was really appreciative of how it does it. What you initially think this character is and what he's about is not that at all. It's kind of a redemption story, but it's done in a much different way than you would expect. That's all I'm going to say, because I really don't want to spoil it. I really, really enjoyed it. It sort of takes the crime drama and the sort of prison film thing and kind of messes with the genre quite a bit. It kind of destroys all your expectations of what the ending is going to be. So I was pleasantly surprised by that one. The other one I watched, and this is one that's sort of pertinent to the little Western series we're doing right now. It's called The Ballad of Lefty Brown. It's starring Bill Paxton, and he's playing one of these characters like Buck from Stagecoach, or one of Walter Brennan's characters in some of those John Wayne films, of the old coot sidekick, or the sort of offbeat character with the weird voice who follows the hero around and, has always got his gun to give to the hero, or is always taking the hero's bags and carrying them behind him and shit like that, right?
Well, we got to watch out for them Apaches there.
Exactly. Bill Paxton even Or Bill Pullman, Bill Paxton. Jesus Christ.
I'm like, was this shot a few years ago? Because
there it goes again.
Bill Pullman, Bill Pullman, Bill Paxton thing.
Yeah. Okay. Bill Pullman, fucking. He even puts sort of that kind of inflection in his voice a little bit, right?
Yeah.
He's obviously studied all these sort of sidekick characters, and this is essentially what happens if the sidekick character loses the hero. What if the hero dies? And what does he do? And it basically is a character study of Lefty Brown and the opinions all the people in his life have of him, and what kind of inner strength and abilities he has, if any. It's a little overlong, but I just enjoyed the whole thing because it's just, honestly, I think Bill Pullman deserves a kind of Oscar nod for this, honestly. It's that good of a performance. He takes on the sort of tropes of that sort of character, but he doesn't do it in a way that makes fun of it or it slides into just outright comedy or anything like that. Like it both nods to those things, but at the same time it's very serious, and I really highly enjoyed it. It's one of the few westerns I've seen in the last few years that has actually been worthwhile watching, I think.
Yeah. Well, you kind of have me at Bill Pullman, honestly. Like, Bill Pullman in a lead role as this sort of sidekick character. Bill Pullman, I have this, obviously, Spaceballs and Independence Day are kind of the two, like kind of bits. Spaceballs from my childhood and Independence Day from my teenage years, but, haven't seen him do a whole lot since then. But I can, of course, Zero Effect, which is the...
and then he did the sequel to Independence Day, too, where he had a big beard.
Well, I'm pretending that doesn't exist. I'm pretending a lot of things don't exist these days, but that sounds interesting. I might have to check that out before we come back together again.
It's definitely worth checking out. I highly enjoyed it. I think it's just cool that this idea of like this really kind of neat idea of like, let's really examine one of these sort of stock characters and let's put them as the star of the film and let's see what they can do. Like let's explore what they're all about. And
something that I think we'll kind of get into as we discuss Stagecoach is the idea that we sort of get this idea of, the Western tropes got so used and then overused and then reused and then inverted, etc., that ultimately, we kind of know the genre so well, just culturally, that you can kind of take any character from it and then just like turn the whole thing around that one character and say, well, what does it look like from this angle? Which is kind of what we did with High Noon, last time was, once you kind of turn it on its head and say, well, what if Will Kane was actually the bad guy? Suddenly the film makes a lot more sense, right?
It does.
You suddenly get it,
And I think the best thing about this is it's not a revisionist Western. I would not call it that. It actually kind of sticks to the sort of classical Western tradition of there's well-defined good guys and well-defined bad guys for the most part. And so it's exploring the classic Western, but still sort of staying true to sort of the ideas and the themes of those sort of classic Westerns.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely looking forward to this.
Yeah, but of course it's got like a 2017 grittiness to it too. Like, everybody's clothes is dirty. And
really what I look forward to in like the true kind of modern take on a Western is when people have really shitty teeth, when everybody in the movie has, missing teeth. That's when you're really like, okay, now we're really looking at a modern day Western. When you realize nobody had a dentist.
Yeah. They do some of that in The Proposition, the Australian Western from years ago with that Nick Cave wrote, where they just the flies. They're just they focus on how many flies are just swirling around these people at all times, right?
also medieval films and those kinds of anything in the medieval era, everybody should just be covered in shit all the time. That's what.
Yeah, even and the aristocracy, not usually known for taking baths. So they might have nice clothes, but that's about where it stops.
There's a thing that was kind of showing up on my Twitter a couple of weeks ago, which was, some bit of writing from, the 14th century or something, where sort of nobility from England or whatever was worried that the Vikings, that the Vikings were going to take away all their women because the Vikings had the temerity to bathe. And they were effectively calling the Vikings sissies for bathing. But then that meant that the women were more attracted to them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there might be something to that. The Vikings
Yeah.
did a lot of, hey, I'm going to insert myself into your royal bloodline and take over your territory for a few generations. It's, there might be something to that. But yeah, I guess we'll take a short break and then we'll be right back with Stagecoach.
Hello and welcome to Hello, This is the Doom Show. I'm Richard.
And I hate the burning.
Shh, who are you? Speak.
And I'm Brad.
She came in and said, "Buck, buck, buck," and he said, "Buck, buck, buck," and she said, "Buck, buck, buck, buck." That's what I got.
One is the Suspiria boner, the other's the Inferno boner. Anyway.
Which one is crying? The boner of tears.
Hello, This is the Doomed Show is available on hellodoomedshow.podomatic.com and doomedmoviethon.com.
Hello, this is the Doom Show. Richard, Brad, Jeffrey, Nava. It's the Doom Show. Hello, this is the Doom Show. Slashers, giallo, and horror. It's the Doom Show.
This is a distress call from across time and space. I am Babs, the automated biological support system for the humanoid known as the Witch. Witch vs. the Doomsday Clock is the weekly chronicle of his fight for survival and entertainment on the junk heap of the future. Episodes are transmitted in 15-minute pulses across the dimensional divide weekly for your listening pleasure. As you will learn, the future is not set in stone, and a flux capacitor is a girl's best friend. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, TuneIn, and on your Android device. Come join the rest of the Meat Popsicles in our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/witch vs. the Doomsday Clock. The replicant known as Witch can be found on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr and Instagram by searching for THEWYCH. The Witch vs. the Doomsday Clock is a proud member of the Legion Podcast Network. Now in the words of Lord Humongous.
Just walk away, and there will be an end to the horror.
Looking for something different in your podcast library? Then why not check out the Podcast Under the Stairs? I'm the host Duncan McLeish, and joining me each week will be a special guest as we examine some classic, old school horror favourites, as well as some modern classics. That's not to say that we don't tackle some of the, let's say, more questionable entries into the horror genre. And if all that wasn't enough, we have a subset of shows called Baz v Horror, where our horror novice, the Baz, tackles horror in all shapes and forms to see who will come out victorious. So what are you waiting for? The show can be found at podcastunderthestairs.wordpress.com and on Stitcher and iTunes. The Podcast Under the Stairs is a proud member of Legion Podcast Network. This is Duncan McLeish from Under the Stairs, signing off.
You ungodly warlock.
Summer
Okay, Stagecoach, 1939.
In our streamlined world today, adventure takes wings. Planes scuttle across country at a blazing speed. Man has raced around the earth in less than 4 days. Planes roar at 400 miles an hour. Airships, streamlined trains and buses speed thousands to new frontiers. Yet well within the span of our memory, the streamliner of its day, the American stagecoach, crossed the uncharted rugged West, bringing new people to a new country. What fascinating stories there were in the life of the stagecoach, and in the lives of its courageous passengers who found romance in danger and understanding in strange companionships. From the adventures of these American frontier characters, John Ford has created a truly great motion picture, Stagecoach, a drama as forceful and as true as The Informer, and as gripping as The Hurricane.
Did you all hear what the lieutenant said?
What are you trying to do, scare somebody?
If you'll take my advice, ma'am, you won't take this trip.
My husband is with his troops in Dry Fork. If he's in danger, I want to be with him.
All right, folks.
Hey, Curly, why don't you take the cuffs off the kid? He's mighty handy with a gun.
You drive them horses. I'll take care of the kid.
The man works all his life to get a hold of some money so that he can enjoy life, and has to run into a trap like this.
Trap, brother? You mean the Apaches? There's been no sign of them.
You don't see any signs of them. They strike like rattlesnakes.
You talk too much, Gatewood.
Don't threats, don't please.
Take it easy, Gatewood. We may need that fighting before we get to the ferry.
You wouldn't be much good in a fight, you jailbird.
Oh, leave the kid alone. He's handcuffed.
Ringo asked me to marry him. Is that wrong for a girl like me? If a man and woman love each other, it's all right, isn't it, Doc?
Don't you know that boy's headed back for prison? Besides, if you two go into Lordsburg together, he's got to know all about you.
You didn't answer what I asked you last night.
Look, kid, why don't you try to escape?
I gotta go to Lordsburg. Why don't you go to my ranch and wait for me?
Wait for a dead man.
Directed by John Ford, written by Dudley Nichols and Ben Hitched, based on a story by Ernest Haycox, I believe. It is starring Claire Trevor as Dallas, John Wayne as Henry the Ringo Kid, Thomas Mitchell as Doc Boone, Andy Devine as Buck, John Carradine as Hatfield, George Bancroft as Marshal Curly Wilcox, Louise Platt as Lucy Mallory, Donald Meek as Samuel Peacock, Burton Churchill as Henry Gatewood, Tom Holt as Lieutenant Blanchard, and Tom Tyler as Luke Plummer. Did you have a synopsis that you had on hand?
I do not. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, I got one right here. The American West, late 1800s, a stagecoach sets off across an untamed wilderness carrying a mixed assortment of characters: an infamous outlaw, a drunk doctor, a prostitute, a whiskey salesman, the wife of an army officer, a gambler, a bank manager, the local marshal, and the driver. Animosities and petty differences and unexpected friendships surface. Their fortunes take a turn for the worse when they learn that an Apache raiding party led by Geronimo is in their vicinity. So that was a IMDB synopsis from Grant Well, I guess it's Grants. I don't want to say Grant SS because that has a weird connotation.
It's Grant's S. Yes.
Yeah.
I love that.
There we go.
That works.
But yeah, when was the first time you watched this one, Daniel? And what are your sort of initial kind of thoughts on it?
Again, this is one where I don't remember exactly when I first saw it. It might have been about 10 years ago, around the same time I saw High Noon, 3:10 to Yuma. I was watching a lot of Westerns around that time. It probably wasn't too much earlier than that. I think I actually watched it. This one, I think there was a free version on the Internet Archive, and I might have watched it that way.
Sounds right.
Yeah, at that point. I love this film. A lot of these kind of old movies, you watch, especially, this is nearly 80 years old at this point, A lot of these old movies you kind of watch, and as much as you enjoy them, they feel a little bit like homework,
Mm-hmm.
This one, I think, just kind of really gives you the sense of who these kind of people are, and I think it's actually better if you don't, sort of think of this as a John Wayne movie, because, we could talk about the history here, but John Wayne was this kind of no-name actor at this point, and John Ford he'd done a bunch of Westerns in the silent era, but really hadn't done anything for 10 or 12 years.
Right.
And the Western was kind of, not really on its way out, but definitely not kind of the big thing at this point. They did a bunch of B Westerns, but they really didn't do big budget Westerns at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And John Ford kind of convinced the studio, I want to do this big movie, and I've got this kid that who was 40 years old at this point, who I want to kind of make the lead, and it made both of their careers. And then they ended up doing, 20 more movies together or something like that, a bunch of Westerns in Monument Valley, reinvigorate the whole thing for 30 or 40 more years, which is kind of amazing that this one film is that influential. But even without the history of it, just John Wayne, I'm not the hugest, just as kind of a person. I don't always love him in films here. He's such a warm, inviting presence in a way that he a little bit more of the cranky the later years. If you look at True Grit, you kind of think of him as a slightly more ambiguous character, whereas here I think he's this very warm, comforting, kind of charming figure, and this figure who's you really get the relationship between himself and Dallas, Claire Trevor, who I think is just delightful in the film. I love the way that the characters are paired together. I love that there's a kind of high and low element to this. All these characters are kind of trapped on the stagecoach. You have a bank manager, and then you have a prostitute sitting right next to him, and then you got Johnny Ringo, who's the felon. You've got and he's paired with this kind of wealthy Confederate,
John Kerry,
the whiskey drummer, and then the drunk. There are just so many characters, and there's such a sense of these relationships that are built while they're all kind of traveling together through this dangerous territory. And we could definitely talk about sort of the way the Native Americans and the way that the sort of the Mexican characters are portrayed. And I think there's a lot to talk about there. It's period racism. Let's not beat around the bush about that. But I think the film is just absolutely a triumph of the genre and a triumph of just cinema as a whole. I love this film almost beginning to end. I think it really does exactly what you want a film like this to do. Again, it's rightly seen as a classic, but don't let the classic designation throw you. It's really worth a watch regardless.
I'm in total agreement here. Tonight was the first time I watched it. Couldn't take my eyes off it. I was really, really impressed with it. Yeah, this is John Wayne's 80th film, if you can believe that. That's including actual features and shorts and shit like that, right? But this is his 80th film at this point, which is fucking nuts. That's fucking crazy.
He had started in the silent era 20 years earlier, and he had done, just at the time, the silent Westerns, they were shot in a few days, and, it was basically just do a couple of stunts, throw a gun around, and then boom, movie's over, Yeah. And Ford had directed, I think, 30 or 40 films by this point.
He had, no, actually, he had done over 60. There was a bunch of feature length, and he had done shorts as well. And only about 10 of those actually survived from the silent era. A lot of them just disappeared, right? But yeah, these were guys who had been working a long time, and they'd even worked together before this on a couple things. But this is the first time Wayne was.
Well, and in fact, John Wayne had been trying to get Ford to put him in a movie, because he really knew that Ford was going to be his ticket to the big leagues. and Ford was kind of keeping him in reserve until he had the right project. And I mean, it absolutely worked for his career overall. I mean, you know, I think, no less an authority than Martin Scorsese considers the shot of like that push-in shot of like John Wayne when we first see him. It's one of the greatest shots in all of cinema, and it's such a great little moment.
He makes John Wayne a fucking giant in this film. At one point, like near the end there, where he's going in for that gunfight with those brothers that have been gunning for him. He shoots up at John Wayne, POV style, and John Wayne just looks like 7 feet fucking tall right there, right? And it's like there's no allusion to the fact that Ford was definitely, I'm making you a fucking star in this film. I'm putting the camera on you at all times that I can, and just make you fucking look the best possible you can. But at the same time, I think just about every character here, except for maybe the whiskey salesman, they all sort of get their sort of due screen time, right? Like everybody sort of has their moments in this film. I mean, there's a few characters that are more crucial, like the doctor and the sheriff are probably the primary leads next to John Wayne as far as the male side of things go. But everybody sort of gets their moments in this. Like you get a well-defined sense of every.
It's a true ensemble piece. I mean, this is the whole idea is, you know, you've got this bunch of people who are all kind of from different points of life, different walks of life, who are kind of trapped together in this kind of treacherous environment, who have to learn to depend on each other. It is sort of that story of
it's a microcosm of society, really. Like it's a brilliant idea. Let's stick all these different facets of society. Let's stick them all in a stagecoach together, like a little cabin in a stagecoach together, and all that stuff shot on studio. You actually have a roof, like it's an actual stagecoach cabin. So unlike a lot of the way most movies are shot, where the sets don't have roofs at all, like there's no ceiling, you actually see the ceiling in the cabin, so it even makes it more claustrophobic with all these people pinned together. So they all have to coexist somehow together in this thing. And
I mean, it looks like this cramped environment. In fact, John Wayne spends much of the movie just sitting in the floor of the stagecoach, just in between everybody. You gotta love that. I mean, these kinds of cramped interiors, you can they get repetitive in a lot of movies where you're just kind of like, oh, you're just looking at the same four people, staring at each other. But Ford makes the best of it. Monument Valley, I mean, even in black and white, Monument Valley is gorgeous. And particularly, I watched I don't know which version of this film you watched, but the version that's on Amazon, is the Criterion print. This is a cleaned up print, and again, it does look phenomenal. So if you do have to check out that print, that's the one to watch, because there are some old ones that were on I think the one that's on the Internet Archive, and some of the free ones you can just kind of find on YouTube do not look quite as good. And this is definitely one that is worth paying the $2 or whatever to actually see it, like a good version of it, if you have that opportunity.
And still, it is kind of a dirty print, even the Criterion one, because there's no master of this.
Yeah, I think most of the dirt in the thing is actually in the kind of the opening credit sequence, and I wonder if to some degree they kind of left it that way on purpose. Where they could have cleaned it up a little bit more. There is a sense in which I think just the history of it, because once you get past that first, kind of opening credit sequence, it looks pretty good, except for just a couple of shots here and there. And so I do wonder sometimes if there is a sort of deliberateness to let's leave a little bit of the grain in, here at the beginning, just to let people know what I think the provenance of this.
Criterion knows what they're fucking doing. Like, they know how to curate their fucking films, and they know how to present them. So you might be right on that. This is the first Ford excursion in the Monument Valley, and he sort of fell in love with it because he realized, hey, if I do this out here, the studio is going to fuck off and leave me alone.
Right.
So that's great. And I mean, again, going back to the previous episode, I'd say you see the sort of DNA for the Leone stuff here. Like, you can tell how much he just fucking eyeballed this fucking film as well, right? It's just,
well, if you want to talk history, I mean, Citizen Wells, the biography of Orson Welles. I haven't found this anywhere else, but I did read that biography again many years ago. It's well known. It's kind of well reported that Orson Welles watched this film a bunch. when he was prepping, when he was learning. Basically, he was learning how to direct by watching Stagecoach.
Yeah.
It's not just that. He was learning how to direct and edit. He had a Moviola, and he was re-editing Stagecoach, like on his Moviola, and like cutting different shots together. And so he learned how to direct and edit by basically playing around with the print of Stagecoach for, a couple of months.
It makes sense because
you totally believe that. I mean,
I mean, this is an incredibly tightly edited film. Like you can see the fact that Ford had been working a while, because this is in the work of a guy who knows what he's doing. There's nothing. I don't think there's anything excessive in this at all. Like, everything feels like it has its place. Everything seems to run the time it should run. All the shots, I think, are pretty good. It's very professional. It moves the story along. There's no. I didn't find any slow moments in this at all.
And it's interesting, again, kind of watching. I think you only watched it once in preparation for this, but kind of rewatching it. One of the things that Ford kind of gets known for is like there's kind of deft character work and sort of the corners of frames, and a lot of times they're in these sort of like things that aren't said and things that are said, and sort of detailed work, and sometimes very short little shots of just a few seconds where you really kind of get a sense of these characters. And particularly rewatching it, you really get particularly the character of the doctor, Thomas Mitchell. That's Doc Boone. I really love that performance. He might actually be my favorite character in the film, because at first you kind of think he's just the drunk, right? And then he kind of gets the baby kind of halfway through the film, and he kind of sobers up, and then he because why not? Like, he's still that guy, right? Delivered a baby. Like, in a lesser film, he would just kind of be like, and now I'm sober and I'm going to be fine. But no, he's like, I still like whiskey. It's fine. I delivered a baby. Go fuck yourself. But I love the moment he has at the beginning, and this reminds me a little bit of the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Or the Apocalypse.
Or for the Apocalypse. Fulci film.
The Fulci film, which we talked about last year. But at the beginning, the Claire Trevor's Dallas, she's getting kicked out of town, and the doc, he basically he's like, let's we're the drug society, let's make our way with our head held high. There is this we down us, but really much better pause. They're looking down on us for things that like they're fucking bullshit moralistic shitheads. You know what I mean? And I love that moment. I love that character bit. And it's in 39. It's particularly. I mean, it's almost a radical move to have the prostitute as sort of the lead and the sort of moral paragon. When a film like this, it kind of speaks to 1939 as well. That prohibition had only ended a few years earlier, so everybody watching this film would have remembered. when you couldn't buy alcohol except that would have been kind of on people's minds. Certainly, it's interesting. Kind of rewatching it again, kind of thinking about the way that this. Now we just kind of look back on it as a Western that's sort of kind of part of that genre and kind of reinvented the genre and becomes one of the great classics. It's also, at the time, we can look at it as a portrait of what 1939 was trying to say about their own history. I mean, this is the same year that Gone with the Wind was released, and certainly the sort of Confederate tinges that you get from this, and the sort of the arguments that they're having about like what the war between the states, what the Civil War meant, are certainly. I mean, certainly that has sort of modern connotations as well. But even in 39, they're kind of having, this is sort of the beginning of the Lost Cause kind of mythology, and so the sort of noble Confederate, and Ford isn't having any of that. He does not see this guy as a moral figure. The Confederate. What's his name?
John Carradine as Hitchcock.
Hatfield.
Yeah, Hatfield. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean it's interesting to see John Carradine so young, like because I'm more familiar with a lot of his later movies where he's old and just doing like B parts.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he still gives the character like a little bit of a moral redemption at the end. Anyways, the guy was willing to waste his last bullet to spare the woman possibly being like raped and made a prisoner.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, there, and that's a dark moment in the film, right? When he's. I mean, again, particularly even today, that's a pretty dark thing to do.
Well, yeah, in 39, when they get to the sort of climatic chase where the Apaches are chasing the stagecoach, shit gets really dark there for a little while, because before then there's the story, the characters all interacting, they're talking, they have their back and forth, and there's all these little comedic moments spread through from some of the characters. But then you get to that chase, the whiskey salesman takes an arrow in the shoulder or whatever, and he's got blood spurting out. Like, okay, shit just got real.
I mean, it does kind of fit that pattern where, they're saving the big action sequence for the end. You kind of get this one big action sequence. And, this is probably, this is something that this isn't original to me at all, but probably the best action, the best stunt work up until Raiders of the Lost Ark, almost 40 years later. There's some really phenomenal work done here, particularly, for the time period. A couple of shots are actually, the guy who falls off the horses and then goes underneath the carriage, the stagecoach. That's lifted right. Raiders of the Lost Ark lifts from that and then improves on it based on what they could then do in the 70s.
Yeah, I don't have the guy's name, but he was like a rodeo guy who lived to like 90 or 91, like died in 86 or something like that.
Yeah,
but he did this. He did Ben-Hur as well.
Yeah. But at the time, that was this really really intense thing to have to shoot, to get to shoot. This would have been incredibly aggressive, incredibly intricate for audiences at the time. Really kind of a high wire act. And when you look at, they're not doing this with CGI. They don't even have even the safety stuff that you would kind of think is standard. Just a few years later, was not present at this point. If you see people jumping from horses to carriages and stuff, like that was actually being done basically as you see it.
John Wayne's stunt double there, actually jumping off the stagecoach to the horses to get to the lead horse and or the lead pair of horses and get them to move faster or whatever, and like I guess retether them or something like that. I think it was, but the guy who did that's fucking nuts. Like, but I did read something on the stunt work in that sequence. They had some sort of device. You'll notice when they're shooting at the Apaches, they're shooting their horses, right, to stop them. You'll notice the horse and the guy on the horse, they drop at the same time. A lot of horses, you'll see like pairs of horses drop at the same time. They had some sort of weird harness device that was commonly used in movies around this time that would basically just trips the horses, like trips them right from under. So apparently several horses, either their legs were broken or they were injured so bad that a lot of them just had to be put down.
And that's, again, this is before the ASPCA had anything to say about this stuff.
Still, it is a great sequence. And I guess we should start talking about it, the way the Native Americans are depicted in this. I will give them at least some credit that they actually used real Indians instead of a bunch of fucking white guys with dark paint on their faces,
Well, to be fair, like the one probably the one character we get a little bit of a look at, Yakima, the Apache wife of Chris, is Elvira Rios, who again, fucking gorgeous, right? She was a Mexican. She was not Native American in the slightest. And indeed, the innkeeper is a Mexican guy. But it is there is a little bit more of a sense of, at least these are people of some kind of non-white and not like Italians with slight darkening makeup on, as you saw, the Western. They basically just put like some vaguely ethnic looking person.
Yeah.
Put some feathers on their head and go like, look, you're a Native American now, Yeah.
I wouldn't say Ford was being overtly racist. It was more of a kind of insensitivity of the time to that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, even 15 years later, 17 years later, The Searchers is even worse than this. At least here, it's just sort of the Native Americans are just sort of the external threat, and that's just what the genre did. And it is. Look, I'm not going to defend that. In a sort of historical sense. We're supposed to think it's like a great thing when like the cavalry arrives and suddenly, but one of these groups is an imperial force invading the lands of the other.
That's the thing. That it is true to history that the Indians did attack people and kill people, right? But this movie does sort of skip the fact that it was the white people first who came and started attacking them, right? So
right.
So that is whitewashed over a little bit, but
I mean, it's sort of true to life that the people in the Stagecoach didn't have any, like, they don't have anything to say about the imperial ambitions of the American government, for instance. You know, they're just, I'm trying to get from one place to the other. I'm trying to go to where my home is, etc.
Maybe
you know,
the banker.
Well, the banker, man, that dude, what an asshole, right?
Well, I loved the initial shot, right, where it's fucking. Oh, geez, I had the quote here too. Where is it? Oh yeah, here it goes. They do the zoom in shot too for the banker, like they do for John Wayne later on in the film. So a lot of these characters get these sort of really, really good, like, little shot just to establish who they are, basically. And the banker goes, "What's good for the banks is good for the country," and this guy's embezzling from the bank.
Well, and again, in 1939, like at the tail end of the Great Depression, let's just audiences would have gone, "Oh, what a fucking asshole!" Right?
Exactly. There's no.
And again, the film takes place in, I think, 1880 or 1881, something like that. No, 1880.
Oh, 1880? Okay, July 1880, I think.
Well, Wikipedia says 1880, and I think there is a title card at the beginning. Which is a very particular kind of moment, and there was a financial panic in 1873, as there was like every few years up until like we actually instituted financial regulation post the Great Depression. Gee, wonder how that worked, you know?
Yeah, go figure. And now you're trying to knock them all down again. It's like, great.
And this is the place to get into, you know, sort of the how the gold standard and the fiat currency worked. Every few years, ever since the beginning of the United States, we had financial panics every few years.
Yeah.
As you know, the banking system was not regulated at that point up until after World War II, or at least after the Great Depression. So I think that's something that even, you know, it isn't even necessarily the people in 1939 sort of looking back at 1880 through 1939 eyes. I mean, that would have been sort of on people's mind even in 1880, I think.
Right.
But there is this sort of, even they're kind of looking back to the past and kind of finding echoes, you know, and I think that that's another element of the film. I mean, you know, whenever you look at kind of historical dramas, and particularly films like this, I mean, Westerns, which, you know, the more you look at Westerns, the more you realize that it's really, they're using this sort of the genre furniture. They're using this sort of the starkness of you can kind of do these morality plays that are really about the time in which they're made. And I think that that's sort of the interesting way to look at these. You know, the Westerns in particular are never really about the West. They're about the people who made, you know, the film. And I think Stagecoach is definitely one of those, even though it does feel sort of the moment of the, you know, it doesn't feel like this kind of overtly kind of political statement necessarily, certainly not in the way that some of the later stuff is, not in the way that, I mean, High Noon and 3:10 to Yuma both feel, you know, kind of politically motivated, at least to some degree. Much more than this. This feels kind of like a fun little, you know, kind of genre romp. But there's definitely a kind of look at, it's people in 1939 telling the story of American history from 1880. And I mean, they're definitely kind of looking at, you know, kind of the things that they're going through at that point. And I think the banker character is the clearest example of that. And of course, Dallas. I mean, I kind of mentioned this earlier. I mean, she's one of my favorite characters. I mean, really the thing that I kind of like first latched onto when I first saw the film is how sympathetically she's treated. I love the degree. I mean, John Wayne, I mean, like, look, especially when you think about it, I mean, we know in real life his politics were pretty atrociously right-wing, but to see him in his kind of very first kind of big starring role, being someone who is you know, basically defending the honor of a lady of the night and being a very sort of progressive guy is definitely one of those things that I just like to see. I think it's a little fun thing. And
I like the line that she has where, you know, she's, you don't know anything about me. And he's like, I know enough, or basically I know what I want to know, you know, basically it's like, I accept you for who you actually are, you know?
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, certainly this is kind of one of those character bits that, you know, kind of comes across maybe in performance more so than in the script, but I mean, I think he knows exactly what's going on. Like, I don't think there's any secret about like who this woman is. You know, they're not talking about it, but I mean, I think, you know, he's not blind.
Well, man, talking about just the way Ford would shoot people, and have these good character moments that, you know, it's just a shot that's a few seconds or whatever, and maybe nothing's even said after the baby is born, and they have that little exchange of shots of glances between the two of them across the room, like while they're standing in the hallway, they're on either side of the hallway or whatever, entering the room, and he's looking at her, and then she's looking back at him and stuff. Like, there's so much said in that actual shot that isn't said in dialogue, but you totally get, yeah, she's totally into him, he's totally into her, and he sees just all the good things about her right in that moment where she comes out with a baby. And I think it's like just really, it's the kind of filmmaking I think maybe a lot of people don't expect from 1939. Like, they just kind of think, oh yeah, everyone's exaggerating their performances and all this shit, but this is like real subtle shit that John Ford's putting on screen here, and it's like really great performances.
And expecting the actors to be able to sell that as well, I think, is an important aspect to that. You know, it's not just shooting people and kind of putting it together and editing, but like how sort of getting the actors to sort of do that in the performance as well. And this is something he's going to do throughout his career. Just really trust the actors and kind of give them those little moments. It's amazing that this existed before we had. I mean, you know, a film like this would have been seen once, you know, by the majority of its audience. Like, you know, there wasn't a sense of, oh, we're going to rewatch things on DVD or whatever. Like, it's all, you know, you would have seen it in a theater, you know, one time. Maybe, you know, you do a review, you know, a few years later or something like that. I mean, you know, but certainly not. You kind of like really watch something, and so the very, very small percentage of the audience would have really caught on to it. Right. It's something that's there in the film. And obviously meant something to Ford because he did it over and over again throughout so many of his films.
And it's fun that this stuff really sort of establishes the John Wayne kind of character, like the John Wayne everybody knows, before he'd go on, you know, 10, 15, 20 years later and almost become just a caricature of himself, right? Here's the real fucking deal performances, the real meaty performances that really kind of establish the caliber of actor he is. And I mean, again, I'll fully sit right next to you and say, yeah, John Wayne's a shithead. I'm not a big fan of a lot of his later performances, but I mean, here, this is just really natural, excellent fucking acting from him. Like, he does a stellar fucking job, and he doesn't do a lot. Like, it's very minimalist. I mean, I think even Ford was kind of berating him and stuff. He used that as a method to try to get performances out of people on set, you know, berate people. And he was basically just telling Wayne to act with his eyes. Don't say shit. Just fucking act with your eyes. Don't move your fucking mouth. You know, just give this nice little naturalistic performance. And he does get a really, really great performance out of Wayne in this.
Well, I think that Wayne's best performances are in Ford films. And Ford's best films are those with John Wayne in them. I mean, it's interesting how the two really disagreed on so many issues. They were politically on complete opposite ends of the spectrum. And I think that tension plays in their best work together. You know, The Searchers is, I think, a film that neither you or I have any particular love for, for a variety of reasons. Ford's making one film and Wayne's making another. You know?
Yeah.
And that's not really at play necessarily in the Stagecoach, because like Wayne didn't have any particular. I mean, really neither one of them had a so they weren't the giants that they would. What it is, it's just it's much simpler than some of the more thematic, complicated stuff they're going to do later on.
All right, so I think we're both in agreement that this is both a classic and a classic you should actually watch. It's kind of required viewing, I think, if you're a fan of the Western genre. I mean, this is where a lot of this shit starts. So, right. I mean... And
even if you're not a huge Western fan, I think this is just for historical importance, if nothing else, this is worth seeing.
Yeah.
But also, I think this is one that could convert people who aren't necessarily Western fans to, like, this one is actually worth seeing.
Yeah, because it isn't like the B pictures that came before it. It's actually kind of gritty, and there is some serious stuff in it as well. Like it has some meat to it, and it's got great performances.
Yeah, and it's mostly like character work. I mean, it's almost like a bunch of people in a room talking. You know, like it's almost a character drama. You know.
So we'll go over a couple things here. Budget was $531,374. That's a pretty precise fucking figure there. Box office, and this is legit box office for 1939, $1.1 million. So that that tells you something. How fucking good this movie is and how many people saw it. There was a 1966 remake with Anne Margaret, Van Helfen, and Bing Crosby, of all people.
Yeah, I found that on my research for this, and I'm like, well, we should cover that, if nothing else, for Anne Margaret.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking we should actually cover this at some point. And there was also a 1986 television version with Chris Christopherson, Willie Nelson, and Johnny Cash. We might not
maybe
cover
for
that
episode 200. Maybe for episode 200 we'll do that.
Episode 200 for that motherfucker. Yeah. DVD info on this. There's a Warner 1-disc DVD from 1997. Then they did a special edition 2-disc in 2005. But of course, the one to look for is the Criterion Blu-ray from 2010. That's basically your best possible one to go for here.
Shout Factory has the streaming rights for it, so if you are an Amazon member, you can get the Shout Factory like little addendum, the little channel, for $3 a month, and you can watch this as many times as you like.
And actually, you don't even have to pay. You can get it for free, because if you go over to Shout Factory TV, forget fucking Amazon, you can just get it for free.
Oh, well, or you could do that.
Yeah. Or, again, probably Internet Archive, and there's shitty versions on YouTube if you so desire to do it that way, right? I will mention a neat trivia thing that I liked about this is that John Wayne, the hat he wears in this, he would wear that in many Westerns for the next 2 decades before retiring it in Rio Bravo in 1959, because it was simply falling apart after that. But I think that's kind of cool.
He wore the same hat for 20 years. Good job, John Wayne.
Yeah, and a lot of people sort of credit Stagecoach as the movie that basically takes the Western out of the B-movie realm and into like an A-movie production kind of thing. But a lot of people also credit several other movies that sort of came in this year. So this is kind of like the pivotal year that took the Western really big. There's Union Pacific, Jesse James, Dodge City, and Stand Up and Fight apparently are all significant as well. Again, we should probably look these ones up at some point as well and do them. But this is a great film, and that's all I have to say about it.
Yeah, no, we've had I don't know what's going to come across in the for the audience, but we had some technical problems in recording this one. So hopefully this kind of comes out okay. If it feels a little abbreviated, that's not based on the film or our enthusiasm for it. It's just based on my shitty internet tonight. But yeah, check this out. Claire Trevor, it's lovely. John Wayne, wonderful. I mean, the whole film is just it's definitely worth a watch.
Right. So Daniel, tell people where they can find you on the internet.
Just go find me on Twitter at Daniel Lee Harper. Everything that I do kind of goes through there. There is a podcast that is sort of occasionally updated. Wrong with Authority, what you do with my British friends, all of whom have been on this podcast before, where we talk about movies about history and the history they're about. And then we have a couple of the threads. We're doing a thread called Consider the Reagan, where we're doing live commentaries on films from the Reagan presidency. And we are taking that strictly between January 20th, 1981 to January 20th, 1989. But we've only done one episode of that so far, but we did Back to the Future. So you can go listen to me and Jack and Kit talk about Back to the Future as a live commentary. And I'm sure Lee will put the link in the show notes.
I will.
And that was a fun conversation. That's definitely worth listening to. There's a lot of fun we had there talking about how Jack was not feeling Back to the Future on a rewatch. So it was fun.
Jack's British. He has weird tastes. It's all right.
But Jack forgot how much of the film was the sort of romantic subplot. And he just wasn't feeling that at all.
Michael J. Fox and his mother. Yeah, that.
Right. Well, even that was fine. I mean, it was at least interesting. But he was just like, my God, this whole movie is about like this romantic subplot. He had just forgotten that element of the film was, like 45 minutes of the overall story.
This film predicted incest porn. This is basically what it did. Although
we talked quite a bit about that, so go check out the commentary.
Yeah. But you can find us at tmbdos.podbean.com, where you can find all of our links to all the great stuff that we do. And if you want to subscribe to us on iTunes and give us a review, that would be great. No pressure. But if you do, please let me know so I can actually boot up fucking iTunes, which I rarely ever fucking do. And I'll actually check out your review and shout you out on the fucking podcast if you do that. But also, this is going to be the last episode of this year. We cannot record next weekend because I am just booked up the yin-yang for work at the back end of the week. So we're not going to be recording next weekend. Our first episode of the new year will be Bad Day at Black Rock. And so look forward to that. But I'll say to all of our listeners and all the people who sort of support our podcast, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's. Be good to each other, good fortune, good health in the new year. And thank you for listening. We really do appreciate the support you guys give us. So look forward to Bad Day at Black Rock. And I think right after that will probably be our Best of the Year episode where we just talk about the best stuff we watched in 2017. And I may... I'm kind of thinking I'll put it out there on the Facebook group. If people want to submit their lists, that'd be great. We could read those on the podcast as well. So I'll work on that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but this was a fun.
Thanks a lot for listening. 2017 has not been as busy as 2016 was in terms of our releases, but that's not based on a lack of enjoyment of getting the comments and such. That's purely based on our personal schedules. So
we really do appreciate you guys sticking with us, especially even through the times where it goes weeks without a fucking episode. It's just been, personal life. Even Daniel legit actually has a life. I have no life, yet still I have a weird schedule where sometimes shit doesn't happen, which is beyond bizarre, but that's the way it is. So, thank you, Daniel, and thank you, everybody, for listening, and we will see you guys in the new year.
Cheers. Thanks a lot.
I made up my mind to change my way and quit my crowd that was so gay and leave the girl who promised me her hand and head down south to the Rio Grande. 'Twas in the spring of '53 when A.J. Stinson hired me. He said, young feller, I want you to go and drive this herd down to Mexico. Oh, it was a long and a toilsome go as we rode on to Mexico with laughter, light, and cowboy song to Mexico as we rolled along. When I arrived in that distant land, I wanted to see my love, but I could not stand. So I wrote a letter to my dear, but not a word from her could I hear. When I returned to my native land, they said she'd married a richer man. They said she'd married a richer life. Therefore, while cowboys seek another wife, let's curse your gold and your silver too. Confound the girls who won't prove true. I'll head out west where the bullets fly and stay on the trail till the day I die.
Thank you for listening to They Must Be Destroyed on Sight. For past episodes and links to our iTunes, YouTube, and Facebook group, please visit us at tmbdos.podbean.com. There you can also find links to other podcasts and websites of similar interest. If you subscribe to us on iTunes, please consider giving us a 5-star rating and a review. Please join our Facebook group, as it's the single best place to get in contact with the hosts and to know what's coming up on the podcast. Thank you. Drive through.